my experience took place in the busiest location imaginable. Lights flashed by at full speed, sound pounded in my temples, and the crowd swayed to the electronic music's beat. I encountered an entity I could never have imagined, an entity that seems to enjoy hiding in the most unlikely and unexpected places. Something that hides where people gather, it literally hides in the middle of the crowd. When I saw it for the first time, it was a Friday night at the nightclub near my place. I was a real party goer who spent his weekends in nightclubs, pretty drunk and bouncing to the catchy sound coming from huge speakers. There was nothing comparable for me to the feeling you get when you let loose, dancing without worrying about what others thought, while blending in with people who had exactly the same goal as me. It was the best way I had to clear my mind. After a whole week of intense work at the factory, I had an incomparable feeling of power and freedom. That night was no different. The sound was amazing, and the lights flashed rapidly. I moved from one end of the dance floor to the other, hopping to the music echoing through the hall. My eyes were darting from right to left, up and down, when suddenly I was struck by a chill that froze my blood. Just as the music was in full swing, I felt something improbable, a feeling that had simply never happened to me in a nightclub before. I had the impression that someone was watching me. I tried my best to shake off that feeling and let loose without overthinking it, but it was impossible. My feeling was gradually becoming certain. I can't explain it any more clearly than what I'm about to say, but at that moment, I was absolutely sure that someone was staring at me. I turned around, shielding my face from the intermittent beams of light with my arm, and I scanned the entire dance floor, looking for whatever was causing me that horrible discomfort, and it didn't take me long to find the source. Because right in the middle of the group of people dancing behind me, right at the center of it, there was someone who wasn't moving. I could only see their legs, but because of the lights flashing to the right and left, I had trouble seeing their face. So I carefully moved closer, weaving my way through the people in my path. Then, finally, I was close enough to him to make out every detail of his face. I was instantly overwhelmed with panic at the sight of the person's horrible deformity. He was probably a man around 40 years old. He was wearing clothes that seemed torn in places, and his partially exposed torso looked stained with blood. But the worst part was undoubtedly his face. His face was so deformed that it would be impossible for me to describe it perfectly without making you feel completely sick. To put it simply, it was as if his face was completely burned, and pus was oozing from every opening created by those burns. He was missing an ear, and his eye sockets were empty, with something purulent oozing out of them. It's as if this man's entire face had literally been put through a meat grinder. His skin looked like a piece of meat that had been left on a barbecue. It was dark, cracked, and filled with deep crevices. Sometimes his entire body vanished behind moving people, or when the room lights dimmed, and it was getting harder and harder for me to succeed, to know for sure where he was. And just as I was wondering if I should go to the restroom to splash some water on my face, blaming everything that was happening to me on a hallucination, he suddenly appeared right in front of me. My scream probably went unheard because of the music, but I had never screamed like that in my entire life. I immediately fell and landed on my butt. In an instant, I instinctively covered my eyes with my arms, because I knew that just seeing his horrible face would probably haunt me for the rest of my life. Between my fingers, I saw his cracked lips slowly open, and he said something I could never hear, but I managed to read his lips, and I'm sure I saw him say it. "It's going to happen." The next moment, a spotlight passed over my face, partially blinding me at the same time, and when I looked in front of me, there was nothing left. The entity had completely disappeared. My feeling of panic, however, did not go away. However, I no longer felt watched at all. However, something new and unsettling was added to all that had just happened to me. I could smell a particular odor, and it surprised me so much that, at that moment, I had to hold back my nausea. There was a burnt smell all over the room. I quickly got up and weaved between people to get to the restroom as fast as possible. I vomited the small meal I ate before coming here. Then I stood over the sink and splashed water on my face several times. I had no idea what had just happened. I also couldn't tell if it was possible that it was all just my imagination. And it was when I noticed a detail that I realized what I had just experienced was real. The smell of burning was still there. I could smell it on my clothes. I even blew my nose several times to make sure it wasn't coming from there. But nothing helped. The smell was coming from the entire nightclub. After leaving the restroom, I went to the bar and ordered the strongest whiskey. When the bartender put it on the counter, the next second, I had downed it in one go. I asked the bartender if he smelled anything, and he said no, looking at me suspiciously. I'm pretty sure he was judging me, and that in my opinion, I must have taken something that had altered my senses. The smell was starting to hit me in the gut and gave me a nausea I just couldn't shake. I then stood up and scanned the crowd. Once again, the entity was clearly not there. The only thing that lingered from that horrible experience was that awful burn smell. Then I sat down on a box and thought for a moment, it's going to happen, but why? Had he said that? What was supposed to happen while I was lost in my thoughts? And the music kept playing one after another, in time with the crowd, dancing energetically. I felt a strange vibration coming from the speaker just below me. It had nothing to do with the vibrations from the music. It mainly made me feel the speaker was defective. I stood up and looked at the back of the device, which was positioned against a huge wooden beam painted black. And right at the base of the speaker box, where all the electrical wires were, I saw sparkling sparks hitting the wood. There were so many of them that I couldn't tell you how many there were in just 5 seconds. At first I was doubtful, but I quickly made the connection with my previous experience. The charred body of the entity, the constant smell of burning that no one but me seems to have noticed, but above all, the sentence he uttered just before disappearing. It's going to happen. Something is about to happen. The nightclub is packed with people, the room is filled with flammable materials, and the venue is on the verge of creating the worst disaster imaginable. I sprinted to the disc jockey booth, barely dodging the nightclub bouncer. I pushed the disc jockey who was mixing and shouted into the microphone, "Get out of here immediately, the club is going to catch fire." The crowd movement that followed was immediate. The microphone came off its stand and hit a turntable, which immediately stopped the music. People then started to run, to panic, and the room went from being almost impassable because of the crowd to a place as empty as an airstrip. People rushed to all the exits. And just as the bouncers were about to reach me, one of them stopped and looked toward the booth I had just left earlier. The sparks had been replaced by small flames that quickly started to grow, reaching the wooden beam behind her in just a few seconds. The flames then spread rapidly, and part of the ceiling itself began to burn. I was evacuated with the others, and even outside, the fire had begun spreading across the roof. I think you can guess what happened next. The entire nightclub had completely burned down just a few minutes after I was evacuated. The flames had already devoured everything in their path, but miraculously, there were no victims. I was questioned by the police, but when I explained to them what I had seen behind the box, they conducted the investigation and quickly concluded it was a fire of electrical origin. Since that night, I've been trying to live normally, as best as I can, but I still can't figure out what that entity really is. Did she try to warn me about the disaster that was about to happen? Or, on the contrary, is it possible that she was the cause of it? Sometimes I feel like I can see her out of the corner of my eye among the crowds. But I never again felt that strange sensation from when we first met. I'll likely never know that entity's intentions. But one thing is certain, since that night, more than ever, I do everything I can to avoid places where people gather. If I have one piece of advice, it's to do the same.